Hey folks, my name is Mo Amir and this is VANCOLOUR, British Columbia's bona fide culture and politics TV talk show. Tonight, BC politics is heating up. And while there may not be an election on the horizon, the biggest issue in the province right now continues to be DRIPA, the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act. Should we scrap it, amend it, or keep it as is? The first Gen Z leader of a major political party in Canada, with endorsements from David Suzuki, Dr. Gabor Mate, and Grand Chief Stuart Phillip. Back in September, she was elected as the leader of the BC Green Party, with over 60% of support from party members, Emily Lowan. Emily, hello, so nice to see you.
Great to be here, Mo.
So I gotta be honest, when I think about being 25, I kind of cringe at some of the things that I did, that I believed in, some of the political parties that I may have been associated with. You're 25, fair or unfair, some people may think that that's just too young and you don't have enough experience to be a leader of a major political party. So what do you say to those folks?
Yeah, I think young people my age are tired of not having a politics that represents them. And increasingly, as we face the climate crisis, the affordability crisis, the housing crisis, you know, it feels like there's so many systems working against us, that our economy is rigged against us, and that no matter what we do, you know, we go to school, we get a good job, or we try to get a good job, and it is impossible to buy a home and really make a living in this economy. And, you know, as with the climate crisis, young people have the greatest stake in the future. So why aren't they a part of the decision-making rooms? Why aren't they in the legislature? And I don't think it's any coincidence that we see, you know, young people, working people, renters, you know, not voting, right? In the last election, 43% of people who were registered to vote chose not to. You know, why is that? That's because we have widespread hopelessness and the feeling that we're choosing between the lesser of two evils. You know, and that's where we lose people. And so I think the advantage that I bring is not just that I'm young and that I have bold ideas because of that. It's that, you know, I'm also a renter, I'm a worker, and, you know, we're in a legislature where, you know, most people own multiple homes. You know, I have the greatest stake alongside, you know, working people in this economy. And I think it's just incredibly important to address this real crisis of hopelessness that we see across my generation and beyond. And I think the BC Greens are increasingly becoming that vehicle who have the courage to tackle BC's 1% and the biggest corporations that are making our life harder.
So let's talk about that for a second, because there was a recent Angus Reid poll that basically asked British Columbians what their top issues were. Cost of living, housing, healthcare, the economy, and public safety were the top 5. In terms of a branding exercise or how people may see the Greens, they may see them as the party of the environment or climate change. Climate change doesn't seem to be in that top 5 in terms of the top issues. So, you know, how do you position yourself as relevant to the general public when that's maybe not on their radar?
I mean, I had the privilege of being politicized because of the climate crisis. And I want to acknowledge that that is a privilege. You know, I think many people are brought into politics because of their race or their class and for many other reasons. And, you know, this is why I was brought in. But quickly I realized that people don't care about the climate when they're you know, too focused on working 3 jobs and trying to put food on the table and don't know if they can even make rent at the end of the month. And so that's why we're laser focused on wealth inequality and doing the things to tackle the affordability crisis that have the amazing side benefit of also helping solve the climate crisis. I think honestly the war in Iran is helping people realize just how volatile fossil fuels are globally, and the fact that energy is really at the heart of everything, and that when, you know, the prices of fossil fuels go up as they have, I think people are, you know, crying at the gas pump right now. It makes our groceries more expensive. It makes it more expensive to build new homes. Transportation is more expensive. And I think people are also realizing that there's a real crisis of democracy there. You know, when they have these foreign dictators like Trump have such a stronghold on the fossil fuel economy, it's more important than ever that we build true independence in our province with renewable energy. And we know that we can offer, you know, tens of thousands of good union jobs in that process. And
I guess what I'm getting at is, is there a challenge for you to, because the reality is most people don't follow politics like you and I may follow politics. So is there a challenge where you're trying to present the BC Greens as, hey, we're not just the climate change party, but we are talking about, you know, wealth inequality and other issues that affect your pocketbook?
I mean, I honestly, I look to the success of the UK Greens. I think Zach Polanski is breaking expectations on what Green parties are capable of. They recently won a by-election in Denton, traditionally a very working class neighborhood, and you know where the other two parties are fighting on culture war issues, blaming migrants for just about everything. The Greens were able to win that by-election because they were laser focused on bold solutions and bringing people together on wealth inequality issues. And so that's the approach that we're taking here in BC. You know, we see a very similar pattern. I mean, David Eby, Keir Starmer, there's certain parallels to UK politics for sure.
Do you see yourself as the real left party in British Columbia?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, and I think a lot of people in the NDP have been conflicted about whether or not to change the party from the inside or whether to join the BC Greens and help change it
Really?
from the outside. And
Wow.
I think, you know, my leadership race really helped demonstrate that. You know, we doubled the base of our membership in just 5 short weeks, and we're continuing to see that scale. And I think more and more people see that the BC NDP has abandoned their traditional base, you know, across workers, renters, and particularly labor unions, Indigenous nations right now with the issue of DRIPA. And so I want the BC Greens to be leverage for progressives, for working people, for renters, to strong arm whatever government is in power. And I think that's why it's an incredible opportunity, because we're one seat away from governing the balance of power. And we have historically. And so I think increasingly, you know, progressives see the strategy of coming to the BC Greens as a way to strong arm the governing party.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned DRIPA, so let's take a quick break. And once we're back, let's talk about why your party is the only one that's defending DRIPA as is. Welcome back to This is VANCOLOUR. DRIPA, the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act, has become the most contentious issue in BC politics. The BC NDP want to amend it after recent court rulings. The BC Conservatives want to scrap it entirely. And the BC Greens are the only party in the BC legislature who want to keep it as is. Here to defend DRIPA, our guest for the entire program, BC Greens leader, Emily Lowan.
Hello, Mo.
Emily, thank you so much for sticking around.
Yeah.
So in a recent poll, a majority of British Columbians felt that DRIPA goes too far. As I mentioned, your party is the only one in the BC legislature that wants to keep DRIPA as is. So are you out of touch with the majority of British Columbians?
Great question, Mo. So, you know, let's look at what DRIPA actually is. You know, DRIPA is enshrining the bare minimum standards outlined in the United Declarations of Human Rights. You know, it ensures that Indigenous people will be consulted by the government and by corporations if they want to build stuff on their land. It basically means free, prior, and informed consent. And that is a human right, full stop. DRIPA is a framework that really brings together this set of rights. And it also, you know, it includes the Section 35 of the Constitution. And that Section 35 was key to the Cowichan case, for instance. And so just zooming out, like, you know, we've had months of debate and toxic debate and misinformation peddled by EB and the Conservatives. And I think British Columbians want to see a clear course forward, right?
You think Premier Eby has also peddled misinformation on DRIPA?
Absolutely. For instance, with the Cowichan case, the Cowichan have said it themselves. They're not going after private property. That is not part of the scope of their negotiations. And it generally isn't for any title claims. And so, we need to ensure that we're not pitting homeowners against Indigenous peoples in a housing crisis. This is just, again, sort of a manufactured culture war that is causing so much unrest and hatred amongst each other, when what we should be doing is looking up at the real estate investor trusts who are buying up huge swaths of land and housing that are actually making our housing and cost of living worse.
So the 53% of British Columbians that think DRIPA has gone too far, you think they're misinformed or misled by both the government and the official opposition?
And I think that's partly because the media cycle has been so focused on, the perceived risk to British Columbians, when that is not factual. When we look at the actual decision, the 800-page decision of the Cowichan case, and also looking at the Giksala decision as well, this is an issue of government inaction. They had decades, years to come to the table and update the Mineral Tenure Act, a 160-year-old piece of legislation. And, yet again, they delayed to the point where nations had no other choice but to take it to the courts. And so I think where we need to go from here is to take a proactive approach to ensure that, nations aren't being pushed to this point of legal dispute. Right? We need to actually invest in things like the BC Treaty Commission. We need to invest in the processes that rebuild trust and get people to the table instead of through a long, costly, and hostile court process.
The BC Conservatives have this line that they iterate in different ways where they say, there is a duty to consult with First Nations, but First Nations don't have a veto. And we're talking about Crown lands, so that would affect things like natural resource development, whether it's mining or forestry. How do you see, that argument? Do you think First Nations do have a veto when it comes to those type of natural resource development projects?
Absolutely. And I think let's flip this around to municipalities. Think about the community you live in. If a project is going to pump sewage or wastewater into your community, or is going to...
Then I'm a NIMBY.
Yeah.
I turn into a NIMBY. Yeah, sure.
But I think crucially, we need to think about the process. And historically, consultation has just been a checkbox to the government. They haven't come to the table in good faith. And so, nations have had to go through the court process. And I think what we need to do differently is, have that early stage consultation across communities, whether it's a nation or a municipality, and, really dig into, is this project in the public interest? How is it going to impact this community? And the BC NDP have really just allowed, frankly, corporations to swoop in and fill that role. They've come in and wined and dined communities with big promises of what these projects will mean. I'm thinking of the Prince Rupert gas transmission line, which is funded by some of Trump and Epstein's friends. Crucially, I think the government needs to be investing in proactive process so we don't have these hostile relationships. And we need to chart a better course on consultation, but also, empower the people who are most impacted to say no.
We just have a couple of minutes left here, but moving away from Crown land, public land that we just talked about with the natural resource development projects, and moving to private property. Let's say the governing BC NDP just wanted to add a clause in DRIPA that says that this is not applicable to fee simple land or private property. Conceptually, would that be something that you support? So it's not changing DRIPA, it's just adding that one clause to try to do their best to protect private property rights.
And I think that's already part of DRIPA, and I actually support an inclusion like that, but that's not what's on the table. The NDP are trying to
I feel
suspend.
I feel like it would put people at ease if there was an explicit clause like that.
Absolutely. And I think, I would absolutely support an explicit clause like that. And, it's already, I think, inherent in DRIPA, but I think really we need to be talking about what the government is proposing. Mm-hmm. They're proposing up to 3-year suspension of human rights. And, I think that's something that this is causing for me just a real crisis of who we are as British Columbians. I know that we stand united in support of human rights, but this government is purposely misinforming the public on what DRIPA means. The only
course... In 30 seconds or less, why is it that you, as the third party, BC Greens, are defending DRIPA more vociferously than the government and the BC Attorney General, who's now the Premier, David Eby, that actually brought it in? Why do you think that is?
I mean, I'm just as puzzled as you are, Mo, to be totally honest. This DRIPA was central to John Horgan's legacy. And I think nations, after having many conversations with them over the last months, felt like they had a better working relationship with John Horgan than this Premier, who time and time again has disregarded Indigenous rights and really community-based interests. And so, we saw this with Bills 14 and 15, the fast-tracking laws that caused, again, a real outrage across nations and community leaders. But I think, when we look back to what happened in 2019, Eby was one of the real laggards on this policy. And so it's up to the Greens to work with labor activists, with nations, to ensure that, we build on DRIPA, we get the government to the table to negotiate in good faith and actually, pursue a common sense path forward. Okay, well, we have to take one quick break and then we'll shift gears and talk about something that you're very good at, social media. Welcome back to This is VANCOLOUR. Australia has already banned social media for kids under 16, and other countries are moving in the same direction. And here in Canada, most people actually support such a ban, with BC's Attorney General Nikki Sharma urging Ottawa to pursue one. To give us her take, someone who is very savvy on social media, the leader of the BC Green Party, Emily Lowan. Emily, thanks so much for sticking around. Yeah, great to be here, Mo. So BC's Attorney General Nikki Sharma has said that she wants Ottawa to institute a ban on social media for kids under 16. A lot of Canadians seem to support this idea. You're on social media. How do you feel about it? I think my hot take is that it misses the mark for me. I find that, bans like this are often a distraction from the real work of regulating tech companies who are surveilling our every move and keeping us more and more addicted to our devices. And so, it's window dressing. It feels like window dressing, and it's yet again shifting the blame and responsibility on individuals, on parents, on teens, than on the actual companies and the corporations. So I think we need to have far more focus on reining in these companies, AI companies included. And we've set forward policy on what that can look like. But I do take issue with the policy in practice, because basically there's two routes here. It can involve a sort of self-select checkbox of are you over the age of 16? And if teenagers, that's not going to fly. That doesn't work. Like, are you kidding? Or it means forking over your personal information, your ID, to these companies to verify that. I'm giving them more of my data. More of your data. And, for me, I don't trust Zuckerberg with my Zodiac sign, never mind my entire identity. And so I think it's really important that we zoom out. And we also look at, the reality is that we aren't going to fix our social media problem, the rampant social media addictions, if we don't look at the well-being around it. And that we don't, there's a teen and male loneliness crisis in many ways. We're so much more isolated than we once were. And I think we need to actually form the communities that we need and to, give people good jobs, employment, and that real structure that will help us look up from the screen, and I think it's about the surrounding conditions. And I'm not saying I oppose a ban. I just don't think it's effective. We need to look at regulating tech companies at scale. I would love to see more advocacy from Sharma to Ottawa on reining in AI companies. And I think it's, I'm hoping that I speak to my generation here, and that we find a way to come together, reduce our social media addictions, and build real community in this time.
Not just your generation. I got to reduce my social media use as well. Emily, this has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time tonight.
Yeah, thank you, Mo.
Folks, that's our show. A big thank you to the leader of the BC Greens, Emily Lowan, for her time tonight. We've had some great political one-on-ones this season, from Christy Clark to Brad West to Trevor Halford and Aaron Pete to Emily Lowan, who you just saw. Who should be on next? Please give me your suggestions and email me, mo@thisisvancolour.com. Also, find me on all the socials @VanColour. We're back next week. Until then, stay colorful. Peace.